Sit Down and Shut Up is the second book by hardcore punk bassist turned enlightened Zen monk, Brad Warner. His first book, Hardcore Zen, was quite a big influence on me in my late teens. I picked it up in a bookshop in around 2002 or so, and it's mixing of punk and the punk ideology of kind of question everything, and the Zen ideology of question everything was quite influential, and I've had a real interest in Zen since reading that book almost 20 years ago. But this is his second book, and this is a book building on his original, which was quite successful, and just interweaving further thoughts on Zen with his own experience of returning for a reunion show to the Ohio hardcore scene, which he had been involved in, and also his views on a particular book by an ancient Japanese monk called Dojin. So he's kind of interweaving these kind of two different ideas in with his own take on Zen as well. His original book was comparing punk and Zen, basically, talking about how they're both very anti-authoritarian and very kind of iconoclastic, very based in the idea of question everything. As I say, that was quite successful. The second book is kind of following on the coattails of this. And Warner's style is interesting. It's quite. It's intended to be quite relaxed, chatty almost, with kind of lots of little asides and footnotes, and all the footnotes tend to be quite kind of jokey. And it's a mixture of kind of this chatty, informal style with a real kind of profound discussion of Zen. I can see it winding some people up, kind of like the proper Zen people being quite irritated by the kind of the little asides about this and that. And the footnotes did, to be honest, get on my nerves a little bit, especially in the chapter where he's discussing the Zen attitude towards sex. It's full of just like, way, I said touch it, or way, I said rub up against it, or whatever it was. Like they were kind of jokingly informal in a way that, to an extreme that personally got on my nerves, but that's a very personal view. In fact, this whole book is going to be incredibly personal. I can completely imagine two different people reading this with two different understandings of what kind of Zen is and what Buddhism is, and coming away with two completely different impressions of the book. As I said, I think if you were an experienced Zen reader, then this would seem not only basic, but just like childish as well. And I think that if you had no experience of Zen whatsoever, this would just seem completely bewildering. I've selected one paragraph here which makes a little bit more sense in context, but really not that much more sense. And he does a little bit to explain it, but not enough. So this is one particularly bewildering paragraph. Dojin explains the story like this. We do not deny the existence of the three vehicles and the 12 divisions of the teaching. We should glimpse the moment of their complete non-necessity, because they were complete non-necessities. They are three vehicles and 12 divisions of the teaching. Because they are the three vehicles and the 12 divisions of the teaching, they are not three vehicles and 12 divisions of the teaching. For this reason, we express them as the three vehicles and the 12 divisions of teaching. That sounds like nonsense, and it makes a tiny iota more sense in context, but really it doesn't make that much more sense, and he really doesn't do a particularly good job of explaining that one thing. Although he does a pretty good job of explaining some other things. Again, if you were more enlightened, if you knew more than me, maybe you would have read that and like, oh yeah, I understand. And with other parts of it that I did understand, I completely get why other people who have read less and kind of have less understanding than me wouldn't get it. There are other parts that do make more sense. This is a hard book to review because it's going to be so personal. I found that it was a good next step from Hardcore Zen. If you read I would not recommend reading this book without reading Hardcore Zen and without having a decent understanding of Zen in general. It was all books on Zen are kind of bewildering and strange because Zen is so contradictory. At the same time, believes that everything is everything is all the same thing, but everything is separate. That there is no God, but there is a God. That everything is there right in front of you, and all you need to do is just realize that everything's in front of you, but also you need to spend your entire life working to figure out what that thing is, and a million other contradictions. Warner does quite a good job in explaining them. He gets some of these koans, which are these riddles, usually monks who've kind of gained enlightenment. And a classic koan would be something like, a novice comes to a senior monk and says, how will meditation gain me enlightenment? The senior monk's response to this is to pick up a tile off the ground and start polishing it with his sleeve. And the novice says, why are you doing that? And the senior monk says, how will a tile achieve being a mirror? That is a classic koan. And Warner tries to explain it and does a fairly good job of explaining it, but it's the kind of thing that will either interest you or not. His writing is pretty good. I enjoy the informal kind of hokey jokiness of it. Sometimes it goes too far for me. The level at which he explains Zen is quite interesting for me, but I'm not going to read any more of his books. It was quite good. It was quite enjoyable, but I feel like I personally need a break from Zen at the moment. I've read 6 books so far this year about Zen, and I'm just done. I feel like I've kind of come to a place where I'm not going to understand anymore. I would recommend it for anyone who's read his first one, and I would recommend his first book, Hardcore Zen, as a really good place for understanding, especially anyone who's into kind of the punk scene or any interest in Buddhism or Zen. I would recommend it as a good starting place. His writing is quite good. I've got a few personal issues with how his philosophy and Zen philosophy. He isn't an enlightened monk. He's actually had the ceremony that declares him to be enlightened. It was a ceremony. He has a piece of paper that says Brad Warner is enlightened, which he laughs at and thinks ridiculous, but he does have it. It's very anti-authoritarian, and Brad makes a big deal of being anti-authoritarian in his childhood, but he does seem to just have swallowed Zen Buddhism hook, line, and sinker, and does not question any of it now. Things like he just says, well, Buddhism isn't an atheistic religion. Buddhism believes in God, but because God is the universe, and just kind of leaves it at that, which I found kind of unsatisfying. He talks about how, for example, there's one line that he talks about that a Buddhist monk had said, one of the great rules for life is to not socialize too much, to spend time on your own. And Brad just goes, yeah, this is great advice, because when I was a kid, I used to go out and socialize and make myself socialize, and I didn't agree it. And I guarantee that no one else there enjoyed it either and wanted to be there either. And then he just kind of leaves it, goes, look at that fantastic wisdom from this 11th century monk. And it's just like, well, maybe. Some people do definitely enjoy being social with other people. I do. And my point is just that he just seems to have, he doesn't question this at all anymore. He seems to have reached a point where he has stopped questioning all of kind of the Zen wisdom, which I found kind of irritating. So, in conclusion, if you've read his first book and you found it interesting, this is worth reading. But if you don't know him, then this isn't a great place to start. I'd recommend his first book. So I would give this. It's a recommendation for the right person in the right place at the right time, but those people are going to be few and far between.